Joining us now is Tim O'Brien. He's the executive editor and a columnist with Bloomberg View. He's the author of Trump Nation, The Art of Being the Donald, for which Donald Trump sued him and lost. Tim O'Brien's scoop at Bloomberg on the financing behind some of Trump's most high-profile business projects and how that may ultimately dovetail with the Trump-Russia investigation. That scoop posts tomorrow at Bloomberg View. Tim O'Brien, great to have you with us. Thanks for being
Rachel.
here.
It's good to be here.
So let me ask you about the sort of central claim. You connect a lot of these dots and put a lot of this history together. But there's this very explosive claim from an ex-employee of this company called Bayrock, which partnered with the Trump organization. He's suing Bayrock, which he used to work for. And he says when he worked at Bayrock, one of the things they discussed internally at that company is that how the funding they were putting into Trump projects was coming from people close to Putin.
Right.
How credible is that allegation, particularly given that he's kind of a disgruntled employee?
Well, and it's purely anecdotal. He has no records that show that the money came from Putin. The Kremlin, in a response, a spokesman for President Putin told me that he had no connection to the bank that loaned the money to the Bayrock Group or to the Bayrock Group itself. However, the banks that came into Bayrock were, and the funding that came into Bayrock was very murky, Putin or not. And it came in through Felix Sater. He was the guy corralling this money for the president. And as we know about Sater, he was a career criminal, mob ties, had gone to jail for assault, had run a pump and dump scam, and then ended up sitting in Trump Tower with the future president, discussing business deals, traveling with him, traveling with his children, taking his children to Russia to do deals. And I think to the extent that the Mueller investigation now is morphing into something other than simply an obstruction of justice investigation, and Mueller begins to try to follow the money trail, it would be interesting if some of this ends up coming back into an examination of Trump and his relationship with Felix Sater.
And the report, there has been previous reporting that's been very interesting in terms of Sater's criminal history, this very interesting and intriguing story in which he pled guilty and then wasn't sentenced until a decade later, and all the intrigue about that for a number of reasons. But obviously, the president is never going to be in trouble for having unsavory associates.
Correct.
That itself is not a crime, and if every politician were indictable for that, there would be no politicians. The question here is whether or not there's money that went from Russian sources to President Trump that had implications other than business implications.
And whether or not these associates who were sitting in his office developed relationships with him back then that in the president's current role could present a national security problem, regardless of whether or not there's a crime. Felix Sater didn't disappear from the Trump universe. As the New York Times reported earlier this year, he surfaced as one of the people trying to push a Ukraine peace proposal to the White House. So why someone who the president has said for years that he didn't know very well ends up with the president's own personal attorney pushing a peace plan and clearly still in the orbit of the White House is an open and interesting question. Also,
famously, Felix Sater had a business card as a Trump Organization senior advisor. That was after Bayrock shut down, right?
That's right.
So they had closed that portion of their business relationship, but personally, he was still involved with the Trump Organization, had an office there, had a business card there, had a job title there.
Yes.
So there's been some continuing association.
And after Trump was questioned under oath in our litigation about whether or not he was concerned about Felix Sater's mob ties at the end of 2007. And yet 3 years after that, Sater continues as a consultant to the company, and a decade later is still in contact with the president's personal attorney.
In terms of the question, again, about whether this is not just association, but this is related to the current stuff, am I also right that one of the people who Bob Mueller has brought on as a special counsel, one of the lawyers who's working with him, is somebody who actually prosecuted Sater for that mob pump and dump scheme?
Andrew Weissman was part of the Eastern District of New York team that went after that whole crew that was doing pump and dump schemes, so yes.
Tim O'Brien, columnist and executive editor at Bloomberg View. The story will post very early tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you,
appreciate
Rachel.
you giving us first
Good to
crack
be
at
here.
it. Thank you. We'll be right back. Stay with us.